Hi, Next Steppers. Welcome to the next session of the beta course. I hope you're enjoying it. As you know, we're going through God Life and we've reached chapter 6. So we're doing pretty well. I hope it's working for you and encouraging you just to keep on going with God. So we're talking on the whole subject. The title is Breaking In. It's how does our faith break into the world? How does our faith apply to things like the workplace? And my guest today is the wonderful Tim Wilson.
Hello.
Good to see you, Tim. You all right?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Cool. So Tim has a real kind of background in the workplace, so that's why we've got you here. I think where I'd like to start is this whole area where I think Christians can get confused. So, I've typically heard in the past, I've got my work over here and I've got my church over here, and neither the two will meet and they're totally separate. And what I do in the workplace is second class because the real work is in the church. But that doesn't really add up in scripture and it kind of kills life as well. And how do you feel about that?
For me, since becoming a Christian, I've always worked out in the construction industry, and it's always been a really important thing for me to develop and understand how I can take that into work with me, and the fact that I don't put it down, I take it with me. And I think the way I explain it normally to friends, to people that aren't Christians or are Christians even, is it's the DNA thing. It's actually because it's a part of every moment of my life.
Yeah.
It shouldn't change, and I take it with me
Yeah.
wherever I go. And hopefully, what people see at work is the same as what people would see in the church.
I like that. The DNA actually is a very good way of describing it. It's something in us, and we can't turn that off, can we?
No.
We shouldn't turn that off.
No.
So, how do you apply your faith to the workplace? I mean, do they call you the God Squad, or what's the background there?
Well, I think I became a Christian probably about 16, 17 years ago properly.
Yeah.
And for the first few years then, I struggled initially to have the confidence to talk about it. And as I got more confident, I would just drop into conversation that I was helping in a kids group on Sunday and things like that. So people began to know that I was just going to church.
Mm-hmm.
And that I was a Christian.
Yeah.
And as I grew in my faith and understood scripture more, understood what we're meant to be as Christians more,
Yeah.
I was able to talk about it with more confidence. And I think for me, I've kind of gone through that journey where I recognise that I don't want to water down what we're learning, what we're following on a Sunday, and it's become something that is first in our lives. It's not second, third, fourth, fifth. And I think I don't get that right all the time, but that's what we kind of strive to achieve as a family, as a couple, and as an individual.
Yeah. So we can't live separate lives. There can't be that sacred secular divide. I think that's one of the most important things in that chapter in the book is that we're Christians 24/7, right? Whatever we do, wherever we are, family, church, work, and that has an outworking in our lives.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think sometimes I get frustrated with some of my friends who are Christians who aren't almost as hungry to actually be like that round the clock, 7 days a week. And I think I go into work now much more conscious because I probably force myself to. Sometimes when you might not want, you might just want to be lazy or whatever.
Yeah.
And I actually force myself to make sure that I'm consciously behaving in a different way. I'm consciously showing that grace to people wherever I can. And I don't always get it right. I know I don't. But it's the fact that you the more you think about it, the more you spend time in the Bible, the more you spend time with God, I think the more you then naturally take that with you without thinking. And that's why I refer to it like in my DNA. And I think for me, I want to be in the workplace. Most people are in the workplace with a mask on almost, and there's two versions of them. They might be slightly different. And I want to get rid of that in me. And I know it's there to an extent. and I don't want it to be there, and I'm working hard to try and make sure that the same me goes there as goes to church, as goes to the shops, as does whatever. And I think that's my challenge is
that's
all,
right.
all the time being like that.
And I think also in the workplace, we are called to witness, but we're not there just to tell people about Jesus. We're there first of all to glorify God in all we do, and out of that, I think people will ask us questions. And I think for me, when I was in the workplace, I needed to be careful not to be preachy.
Yeah,
because they had to put up with me all the time.
Well, I think that's where I enjoy it most. I enjoy the challenge of that because I don't. There's certain people where I'll talk more with, but there's certain people where I can remember one example. I was at a business that I worked at a few years ago now. And I went in on a Monday and explained to. I was on a bank of 4, like you get, the L-shaped desk. And I walked in and somebody says, "Did you have a good weekend? What did you get up to?" And my response was, "I was doing kids work I did kids football Saturday, kids work at church on Sunday." I didn't say any more than that. 2-3 weeks later, she then said to me, "You said you go to church the other day."
Brilliant.
And that then sparked a conversation, and then we got to talk about why I go to church. And that what I've found is that you sow those seeds, have those conversations, and people then are curious, and actually more and more people than you probably know this, but more and more people than one would think are interested in understanding more and don't know enough about it. And for me, that's why I enjoy just living that out in the workplace and letting people ask you questions.
I used to do this deliberately on a Monday morning. I used to go to the coffee machine and I'd say something had happened on the Sunday, and it's like putting out a bridge. And so many people walk onto that bridge. It may be later, as you say, weeks later. But so one of the things about being at work, that there are stresses and strains, not least finding where God would have us be. And we live in a world that is not perfect, so we can find ourselves in situations. I've been made redundant, I know you have. And how do you deal with that pressure? How do you find another job when you've not got a job? That sort of thing.
We could talk for hours and hours and hours about that. And in short, I think basically when I was made redundant a couple of years ago in a role at the end of COVID, and I think it wasn't because poor performance in the business or anything like that. It was actually because of a restructure, and they decided certain roles were being done away with, and I went away from that quite hurt personally, quite damaged by it. But I knew the moment was right, and actually I had a picture in prayer afterwards of that end scene in the Titanic film, where they're looking back at the boat from the floating logs and floating wood, and they're looking back at it, and it felt like that business was really going to struggle because they'd restructured not very wisely, and subsequently they have really struggled in the market. But that wasn't my problem from that point. But I kind of felt that God was saying to me at that point, "I've rescued you out of there," and rather than looking at it as a beaten up person who's been perceived to have been treated badly, we turned that on its head with what we were praying. Sarah and I at home, we focused on the fact that we know God will provide. We put that into a lot of prayer. Obviously, lots of friends were praying for us, and we just dug into what we know, what we learn in Scripture, that God provides and that He has abundance for us in every area. And we prayed through that, and that wasn't to take away from the natural world wisdom that you have to use as well. So I had to make connections with people. I did, and the process to finding that subsequent job was almost miraculous. I think it was miraculous, and some people would say it was just good luck, it was timing. But we prayed through it. We stood firm in our faith. I'd already started walking on a daily basis 6 months earlier, so I kept the habits up of a workday pattern. So I made sure I was getting up early and not getting lazy. And it was really just focusing on the fact that I needed to make certain phone calls and knock on doors, open doors, and actually listen to what was right, because not everything that was being brought to me was worth considering. Even though I wasn't in work, I had the cushion because it was a redundancy of 3 months or whatever notice. And I think it was a case of just being patient and knowing the right thing. And literally, I think the last day of the calendar year, it was the end of that year, the last day of the calendar year, I'd had an interview and been told probably not because we don't know what we want. And I prayed with 2 people, one of our church leaders and one from our old church we used to go to. And that day I made a phone call to the recruiter I was talking to
Mm.
said, how about this? I've never heard of this before, but how about offering me in a temporary situation, which you don't get in my industry?
Yeah.
And by the end of that same day, I had a contract.
Oh, wow.
On a 3 month
I
on a 3 month
love that.
temporary basis with a view to permanent, because I said,
Yeah.
I know that business need people.
Yeah.
I know I need something, so put me temporary. If they like me, I'll stay. If they don't like me, I'll. And likewise, if I don't like them, I'll go.
That's
and
wonderful.
within 3 weeks of starting that role, they made me permanent. So it just, everything flowed. And I put that down to God, because there was a lot of prayer went into it, and everything happened in the right sequence.
No, that's great.
And
It's like God gave you that wisdom as to how to deal with it. And that must come, it has to come from an awareness that He is in charge of every aspect of our life. It's not like work is second class. And therefore we can expect God to answer even in the hardest times, which you've been through on a couple of redundancies. So, yeah. Tim, thank you so much. That's really helpful. Lots to talk about with next steps. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope there's a challenge there for you in all that we do in the workplace and how we handle hard times as well. So thanks guys. Enjoy the discussions that follow from this, and we'll see you next time. Bye.